This right here is a legitimate headline from the Washington Post. Biden stimulus showers money on Americans, sharply cutting poverty in defining move of presidency, and referring to the $1,400 stimulus checks. Holy fuck. Yep. And like Styx points out, nice neutral headline. Yes, Biden makes it rain like he's a fucking athlete in a strip club. Can you believe it? Can you believe that this supposed prestigious outlet is somehow writing these fucking headlines that would make the National Enquirer blush? Like, it's not even fake. Like, you can kind of see it there, but Washington Post is such an absolute Democratic propaganda outlet that I can't properly show you the headline. And that's why I don't like to use the Washington Post as a source on anything, mostly because their information is quickly debunked the next day or maybe within a couple of hours, depends on when the print is. But the only reason I bring that up is because we got a whole bunch of funny stuff to point out. In the last video, yeah, it was Biden trying to federalize and ruin free and fair elections. But to be fair, it's not all doom and gloom. Okay, there's a bunch of state houses out there trying to do it right, and they're mostly run by Republicans. And we're also got to clear up a couple of things because I heaped a little bit of praise on the Democratic governor, and at the time, the information that we were given was a little bit different than what actually happened. So in the case of having the one example that there are Democratic governors out there that actually give a shit about the freedom and the ability for their constituents to make a living for themselves, yeah, we can go ahead and take that one off the docket because Governor of Connecticut doesn't really care about your freedom. He just wants to collect your tax dollars. And yes, it's another update on more states opening up. And I love to report on this stuff, not because I have a vested interest in any of these states particularly. It's just more freedom equals more gooder, right? Multiple governors announced significant rollbacks of the China virus restrictions. Governors across the United States have either ended their state's COVID-19 mask mandate or are considering ending it soon, sort of soon. One of the new ones to hop on board is Utah's statewide mask mandate. So Governor Spencer Cox is scheduling it to end in a month's time. The same with what's happening in Alabama. Probably won't get renewed. That's at least what Cox is calling for, but that dump truck full of dicks, if it's anything to go on, I don't know. I'll believe it when I see it, but call it to a fucking end as soon as possible. I'll be fair and I'll read a statement here. We anticipate that by April 1st, every adult in the state of Utah will be eligible for the vaccine. Utah, he said, will have about 1.5 million vaccines in the state by April 10th when the mandate goes away. Okay, and that's supposed to be the entire point of these mandatory mask mandates. It's supposed to, and this is their idea, it's supposed to keep people safe until vaccinations can be achieved. Because reasons, okay? We've known that asymptomatic spread has been rare for a very long time. This is information straight from the horse's ass, right from the WHO. Asymptomatic spread of coronavirus is very rare. This isn't new. This is from June 8th, 2020. Okay? Top World Health Organization. You don't get to nuke me, YouTube. You probably still will. Who fucking knows? But this is information that people need to know. On Monday said that it appears very rare for an asymptomatic person with the coronavirus to transmit it to another person, a potential bit of good news. It should have been, but this was buried like a Kennedy dinner date. I've been saying it for a long time, and perhaps I've failed in providing my sources, but it's never wrong to continue to dig this back up again, just like additional Democratic voters. For the data we have, it seems to be very rare that an asymptomatic person actually transmitting onward to a second individual, said Maria Van Kerkhove, the WHO's technical lead for COVID-19, when asked about the issue at a press briefing. She noted that the answer is not definitive. We are constantly looking at this data and we're trying to get more information from countries to truly answer this question, she said. It still appears to be rare that an asymptomatic individual actually transmits outward. So why are we still using masks? Okay, if you're sick, stay at home. Fair enough. You know what I'd be down for? Instead of these stimulus checks all the time, okay, if you're sick, if you test positive, you know what? Stay at home. stay at home for 10 days, stay at home for 2 weeks, whatever, okay? If we're so concerned about this virus, and I will take their side for this for 1 second just to make this point, you quarantine the sick and the vulnerable, okay? Take the security measures that you want, do what's best for yourself and your family, but don't force it on everybody else. Now, if we send people home for 10 to 14 days, we wouldn't need such a vast $1.9 trillion stimulus bill, which actually amounts to just $171 billion, 9% of the stimulus bill actually going to stimulating people who are not Democrats that just love to spend your money all willy-nilly. No, to just get to my point, I think if you're going to send people home, if you're going to quarantine the sick and the sick and the vulnerable, pay those people. Pay those people for the 2 weeks in order for them to get over their illness. As soon as they test for the antibodies, no longer present any symptoms, then they should be allowed back out. How about that? Would that be a fair compromise? But I think we're long past that. That is something we should have put into place at the beginning. But once again, if we come up to this situation again and say, oh, maybe, 4 years or so, perhaps we should take a look at that alternative. Now, okay, according to the WHO, they were continuously studying more information that was out there. And before we get back to the good news, I want to show you some different good news. Okay, this is from the end of February. This is just a couple of weeks old at this point. In report affirming nearly no transmissions in schools, CDC slips in shocking data about asymptomatic spread. Yep, and this is why I've been repeating this over and over and over again. The U.S. Center for Disease Control, another one of YouTube's authoritative sources, in a shocking piece of evidence in a recent report on the low in-school COVID-19 transmissions that severely undercuts the rationale of most COVID-19 restrictions, including lockdowns. The January 29th report conclusion seems to fit the pro-mask narrative. Of course, schools might be able to safely reopen with approximate mitigation efforts such as masking and not allowing student cohorts to mix, which is essential to being in school, but we shan't get hung up on that. In the 17 rural Wisconsin schools surveyed, only 7 cases were linked to in-school transmission out of 4,876 pupils, and no staff members were infected at school during the study period. All right. While the report spends ample time explaining the mitigation strategies employed in schools and the high reported mask compliance, 92% among students, because I'm sure they get chastised by not only their teachers, instructors, the administrators, but the little hall monitors that are there. You guys can all think back to grade school and think of that one little ass kisser that used to sit right up at the front, would always answer all the cocksucking questions before anybody else had an opportunity to, just to ingratiate themselves to the teacher because they had no friends and no social skills. I can't think of any of those people immediately off the top of my head. God, no. Why would I bring up that example? Anyways, the authors later discussed something you probably haven't seen in any of the mainstream media's coverage of the reporting. Children might be more likely to be asymptomatic characters of COVID-19 than are adults. Wow! The apparent lack of transmission in schools is consistent with the recent research, which found an asymptomatic attack rate of only 0.7% within households. In case you didn't catch that, 0.7% of people who are asymptomatic, who are potentially carrying this virus, and you don't know, oh, you could have it and you not be showing any symptoms. We should therefore shut down all of society. 0.7% actually transmitted the disease. And by people, that's adults. You know, the people who have had their livelihoods taken away from them. All of their freedoms restricted to the point where a nice vacation spot might be in a western province of China right now, where it's a little bit more free and open, where you get free haircuts, and if you're feeling a little too bloated, they'll go ahead and take out one of those kidneys for you. However, the study was unable to rule out asymptomatic transmission within the school setting because surveillance testing was not conducted. Yeah, all of our information when it comes to adults was proving that we can't really be using facts to perpetuate our constant state of fear any longer. So we aren't going to check with the kids, because you just look at the death rates and the hospitalization numbers for kids, and they make that 0.7% blush, because you need to add a couple more zeros in front of that and an apt description of the people continuing to make you feel There needs to be a sense of fear throughout all of society going forward. The recent research the study authors cite is a meta-analysis of 54 households COVID-19 transmission studies that observed 77,758 participants, not a small number of people, which was posted in a preprint this summer and published in December. The text of the analysis is even more consequential than the CDC's reference makes it seem. Estimated mean household secondary attack rate of symptomatic index cases, 18%, 95% something or other, 14.2% through 22.1%, was significantly higher from asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic index cases, numbers provided. Although there were few studies in the latter group, these findings are consistent with other household studies reporting asymptomatic index cases as having limited role in household transmission. So the people that you are around the most, if they are carrying the virus, not presenting any symptoms because they've either been vaccinated or they have already had the virus and present the antibodies, just not bearing out any evidence that you're likely to catch it from somebody, which makes masking all the time seem a little bit redundant. But I think we're all past the point where governments are using mask mandates to go ahead and make you think that they are actually taking care of your safety and not seeing how much they can continue to get away with. But to be fair here, we got to take a look at what this article points out is the only way that they could kind of work out these numbers to make it seem just as bad as you'd anticipate it to be. Well, at least the way that the media wants you to believe it to be. The only way to circumvent this finding to justify COVID restrictions is to say asymptomatic and pre-symptomatics, that's fun, are highly contagious and making others test positive without feeling sick. Oh, okay, yes, so now pre-crimes for diseases, I guess. Some of these cases may eventually affect someone who develops symptoms, which may eventually lead, so once again charging people for things that they haven't done yet under the auspices that they might commit them someday. So yeah, just doesn't bore out any longer why we have to continue to do this now that vaccinations are there, now that the right people are getting them. The target date for most of the population to get vaccinated is by the end of spring. So summer's going to be back to normal if Republican governors are in charge, because as we've seen here in the beginning, yes, Utah sort of potentially be rolling back, but Texas, Mississippi, Iowa's now hopped on. Montana, North Dakota have now ended or soon will end statewide face coverings amid the China virus pandemic. Alaska, Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Missouri, Nebraska, Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, and Tennessee. Hee-haw! Never required face coverings. They had lockdowns, most of those states, but they never had mandatory face diapers. Like I said before, Alabama, Kay Ivey, her policy is supposed to end out on the 9th, but we'll be taking a peek at what she's doing closer to the 9th to see if it's going to get revoked. Maybe she might do it a little bit sooner. Who knows? The reports early on was that, she was never in favor of it, and then all of a sudden she felt a little bit of pressure, and that's what you get with women in politics. Whoops. Listen, for every Kristi Noem out there, and you guys know I've made countless videos on her being a great governor, there is always one limp-wristed one. Just take a look at Kate Brown in Oregon. The bitch is terrible, faces a little bit of pushback, and all of a sudden starts crying sexism. On March 2nd, Mississippi and Texas both ended their requirements for masks and allowed businesses to operate at full capacity. Meanwhile, Joe Biden cried or tripped over his dog, resulting in his watery eyes about how it was just such a terrible thing that they're doing, and I shouldn't do that, continue to wear masks, Fauci says so too. Maybe this week, I don't know, it's tough to keep up with what a little marionette doll has to say at all times. But I also heaped a little bit of praise on Connecticut's governor, Ned Lamont. Never trust a man with the first name Ned. I'm sorry if there are any of you out there, it's just, it's not a name that is provokes any sort of authority. It just is kind of a weak name. It's like, oh, there's Ned. Ugh. That name should always be preceded by a mandatory throat clearing. Oh, Ned. Ugh. A Democrat. No kidding. Also announced that some China virus rules will be rescinded, including capacity limits that were placed on businesses and sporting events. Amusement parks, he said, can also open. Oh, thank you, Lord and Savior Lamont. But Lamont said the mask mandate implemented in Connecticut will remain in place. Why? I don't know. In February, Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds, a Republican, lifted the mask requirement and said, hey, there's another good one. We know what we need to do, and it doesn't require a government mandate to do it. Yes, let people decide, okay? I think we covered that at the time. Montana Governor Greg Gianforte, also a Republican, allowed the state's mask rule to expire last month. That was one of his campaign promises. He didn't let it continue on after he was sworn into office. He said, hey, we got plenty of trees. We got plenty of space up here in Montana. If you're tired of your blue state, leave your shitty liberal ideas and come on over. And plenty of room, grab an axe. Oh, man, this one sucks to read. West Virginia Governor Jim Justice, great name, kind of a bitch. A Republican said he would lift capacity restrictions on restaurants, bars, and other businesses. Masks would still have to be worn. Why? They don't follow the science. They keep telling you to follow the science. What do they mean by that? Listen to scientists. And like we beat this dead horse and might as well for posterity's sake. Listening to science is good. Making your decisions based on facts and logic and reason is an excellent idea and the best way that you can carry yourself properly throughout society and make the best decisions possible. But following the people in lab coats would lead you to believe that eugenics is a popular topic and something that you should pursue, and therefore open up little camps across the country. May or may not include gas chambers in some instances. Hey, that's what happens when you follow scientists. But it's not all doom and gloom, and it's not all China virus related. There are a lot of good Republicans that are doing good work. Governors, that is. Some of them are rhinos. Jim Justice, what a waste of a great name. No, there are some that are doing great work in the field of censorship because GOP pushes bills to allow social media censorship lawsuits. This is the only way that you can hold them accountable, okay? They keep hiding behind the, oh, my 230, you can't touch me. Well, I've made this argument before and might as well restate it because why not? If these big tech companies are benefiting from government immunity, but they don't have to adhere to the policies and practices of that old document called the United States Constitution, why should they be afforded such luxuries? If they get special treatment and they're allowed to make their terms of service more powerful than the Bill of Rights, if they're allowed to by not prosecuting them, but instead, in this instance, silence being violence, allowing them to collude with their cohorts, what makes them above the law? Clearly, they want to be a part, or the Democrats want them to be a part of their strategy going forward. And you can take a look at that idea being crystallized by the previous executive order that we covered. So somebody's going to have to hold them to account. It's not going to be the federal government. You got to go state by state on this one. Republican state lawmakers are pushing for social media giants to face costly lawsuits for policing content on their websites, taking aim at federal law that prevents internet companies from being sued for removing posts. GOP politicians in roughly 24 states. It started off with just a couple of governors. Ron DeSantis was key among them. Then Greg Abbott from Texas hopped on, but now it's over 24 states. I like where this is going. That would allow for civil lawsuits against platforms for what they would call the censorship of posts, and what reasonable people would consider to be censorship of posts. Many protest the deletion of political and religious statements, according to the National Conference of State Legislatures. Democrats, who have called for greater scrutiny of big tech, are sponsoring the same measures in at least 2 states. Well, there's 2 sane states out there. That's nice. The federal liability shield has long been called out by former President Donald Trump and other Republicans. Yes. We say that Silicon Valley is stifling conservative viewpoints even before the companies cracked down on posts about claiming fraud in the 2020 election. Yes, because they allowed other crazy conspiracies to run wild, brother, from 2016 onward. Ma Russia, ma Ukraine. The bills vary slightly, but many allow for civil lawsuits if a social media user is censored over posts having to do with politics or religion, with some proposals allowing for damages up to $75,000 for each blocked post. Wow. They could apply to companies with millions and millions of users and carve out exceptions for posts that call for violence, entice criminal acts or similar conduct. Now, at least this would be handled by a judge who could read this and not by a biased group of individuals who you don't know who's making these decisions behind these safety and security councils at the different big tech firms. So it would be handed off to somebody who should theoretically have a little bit more authority and somebody who should be a little bit more educated on this, making a nonpartisan, a fairer decision. As much as judges are kind of hacks at some level, it's better than these blue-haired activists making decisions. The sponsor of Oklahoma's version, Republican State Senator Rob Standridge, said social media posts are being unjustly censored and the people should have a way to challenge platforms' actions given their powerful place in American discourse. His bill passed committee in late February on a 5-3 vote with Democrats opposed. Of course, authoritarians most affected. This just gives citizens recourse, he said, adding that the companies can't abuse that immunity given to them through federal law. Exactly, just reiterating what my argument is, and I appreciate that. So there are a couple of antitrust lawsuits out there right now, one against Google, a couple against Facebook right now. There are a lot of lawsuits already being filed, in the process of being filed, that are trying to hold Twitter, Facebook, Google accountable. And this will be one of the tests in the coming years to see how this is going to be changed, how discourse on big tech, social media itself, is going to change, because the way that they can this is big tech in this instance, they can change their terms of service without notifying people, without consulting anybody. You need not look any further than what YouTube does with their medical misinformation or their election integrity project. Twitter, when they fact check different tweets being up there, I know Facebook does the exact same thing. Who consults them on those practices? Why is it only on one side of the aisle that happens? How about purging of accounts? Okay, I've seen 4 Antifa accounts get purged, but the list of the right-wing accounts, even just the types of accounts, they read longer than my arm, okay? You can't discuss anything when it comes to Q on pretty much any platform anymore. Any of the big tech platforms, that is. As much as I'm not a fan of Q, and you guys probably know that, I would love to see their baddie ideas get knocked around in the public square. But because that was just one of the spur-of-the-moment terms of service changes that every big tech company just decided to enact one day within a few hours of one another. That's the world that we're forced to live in without any recourse, because the appeals process at every big tech firm is akin to writing out a letter, writing out a response, and eating it. At least you get a little bit of nutritional fiber out of the paper. It more or less just gets black-holed. You guys know of my struggles, and bigger channels have been hit in the recent couple of weeks, and they at least have recourse. They can go out there, they can reach out to their partner, but when you're the size of this channel, you just kind of got to deal with YouTube and hope they don't come after you too hard. But yeah, by the time that I'm one of those big creators, hopefully something in the law courts is going to figure this stuff out and Section 230 gets worked on, and the world is a much better place. And hopefully we won't have to be wearing masks, because everybody who wants one of those fucking genetic modification shots into their arm to make sure that they don't get a little bit of a fever and a slight cough in the future, they get them. We can return to normal and start holding Biden accountable for throwing singles in the air, making it look a lot more impressive than it actually does. I can't believe the Washington Post said that he made it he showers money on the populace. That's why those authoritative sources, yeah, you just can't take them seriously. If we knew the list of them, I could run them down and show you why big tech censorship is even a bigger pandemic than fucking coof. With that said, we got to let you know about something big that's happening next week, because it's probably going to kick off the race war. With that said, I thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.